Anya Taylor-Joy believed she had tried to kill her father when she was 6 years old. During his heart attack, she had been told to quietly play with her sister, but she hadn't stayed quiet. She had screamed, run around, tried to save him. 20 years later, she still hears the sounds of that night. The memory lives in the space between her heartbeats. Every morning when Anya opens her eyes in her London apartment, the first sound she listens for isn't the city waking up or her phone buzzing with new opportunities. It's the sound of her father Dennis breathing in the room down the hall. This ritual has become as automatic as breathing itself, a morning meditation of fear disguised as love. She counts the seconds between each breath, calculating whether the rhythm sounds normal, whether there's any irregularity that might signal danger. Even now, at 28, even with a career that has taken her to the heights of Hollywood, she still tiptoes to his door like that frightened 6-year-old, pressing her ear against the wood, waiting for the rhythmic proof that he made it through another night. Oprah understood this kind of vigilance. She had seen it in her own mother's eyes during those final years, the way love transforms into a constant state of preparation for loss. She recognized it in the mothers who came to her show, clutching photos of children they had lost, and in the children who had learned too early that the adults in their lives were fragile, mortal, breakable. When Anya sat across from her in the warm Chicago studio, her hands folded precisely in her lap, Oprah recognized something beyond the polished exterior of a successful actress. She saw a child who had never stopped holding her breath, who had learned to translate fear into perfection, anxiety into achievement. "Tell me about that night," Oprah said gently, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 stories she had heard, each one sacred in its pain. "Take me back to when you were 6. Anya's composure flickered. For a moment the cameras seemed to disappear, the studio audience faded, and there was only the memory of a little girl in Buenos Aires, woken by sounds that would reshape her understanding of how quickly everything could change. It had been a Tuesday evening. Anya remembered because Tuesdays meant her father would read her stories in Spanish, his voice warm and musical as he brought characters to life. She had been waiting in her bedroom, already in her pajamas, when the shouting started. Not angry shouting, something worse. Panic. Her mother's voice, sharp and afraid. "Dennis! Dennis! Can you hear me?" The sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Footsteps running. The smell of dinner still warm on the stove. Suddenly forgot. The television still playing cartoons in the background, creating a surreal soundtrack to crisis. Then her sister Victoria's hand grabbing hers, pulling her into the hallway where they could see their father collapsed, in the living room, their mother kneeling beside him with the phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapid Spanish to the emergency operator. "I was supposed to stay quiet," Anya told Oprah, her voice barely above a whisper. "Victoria was holding my hand, telling me to be good, to let Mama handle it. But I couldn't understand why everyone was just standing there, when Daddy needed help." What happened next had haunted Anya for more than 2 decades. Instead of obeying, instead of staying silent like her sister, she had broken free and run to her father. She had shaken his shoulders, called his name, tried to lift his head. In her 6-year-old mind, she was helping. In her adult mind, she had convinced herself she was making everything worse. "The paramedics had to move me out of the way," she continued, tears now flowing freely. "And for years, Oprah, I believed that my interference, my noise, my inability to just stay quiet and be good had somehow made his condition worse. That maybe if I had listened, if I had been the quiet child they needed me to be, he would have recovered faster." Oprah leaned forward, her own eyes glistening. She had interviewed countless celebrities, politicians, and public figures, but this moment felt different. This wasn't about fame or career achievements. This was about the invisible wounds that shape us, the childhood beliefs that follow us into adulthood like shadows we cannot shake.
"What did the doctors tell your family?" Oprah asked.
"That he was lucky to be alive," Anya replied. "That the next few weeks would be critical. That we needed to prepare for the possibility that he might not make it home." Those weeks stretched into months of living in a suspended state between hope and grief. Dennis Taylor-Joy survived, but something fundamental had shifted in their family dynamic. Conversations became quieter, laughter more measured. Everyone moved through the house like they were walking on glass, afraid that too much noise, Too much joy, too much life might somehow tempt fate to intervene again. Anya had learned that the people you love most can disappear without warning, that life is infinitely more fragile than childhood stories suggest, that sometimes being helpful means being quiet in ways that feel impossible. She began having nightmares where she was always too late, always too small, always failing to save the people she loved most. But here was the cruel twist that Oprah helped her uncover during their conversation. Anya had spent her entire career being quiet. Not literally, she had found her voice as an actress, bringing complex characters to life with remarkable skill. But emotionally, she had never stopped being that 6-year-old girl trying to be good enough, quiet enough, perfect enough to keep the people she loved safe.
Every role I take, Anya confessed, I think about whether it will stress him. Every late night on set, every demanding schedule, every time I travel for work, there's this voice asking if I'm being selfish, if I'm choosing my career over being there when he might need me. When I was filming The Menu, I almost turned down additional scenes because it meant staying in Croatia longer. When Emma required extensive period training, I worried the long hours would somehow telepathically affect his health. It sounds irrational, but trauma doesn't follow logic. The pattern had followed her from Argentina to London, from her first small roles to her breakthrough performances. She had developed elaborate superstitions. Calling home at specific times, wearing certain pieces of jewelry her father had given her during important auditions, even choosing projects partly based on how close the filming locations were to her family. The success of The Queen's Gambit should have been pure celebration, but even as the show became a global phenomenon, Anya found herself checking her phone compulsively between takes, calling home to make sure her father was okay, that her success wasn't somehow coming at the cost of his well-being. Oprah recognized this burden immediately. "You've been carrying the weight of his life in your hands since you were 6 years old," she observed. "That's an impossible responsibility for anyone, but especially for a child." The breakthrough moment came when Oprah asked a question that no one had ever posed to Anya before. "What do you think your father would say if he knew you were still trying to save him every single day?" The question hung in the air like a prayer waiting to be answered. Anya's composure, which she had maintained so carefully throughout their conversation, finally cracked completely. The tears came not just from her eyes, but from somewhere deeper, from that place where a 6-year-old girl had been holding her breath for 22 years, waiting for permission to exhale. Anya broke down completely. Through her tears, she shared something she had never spoken aloud. Her father had been trying to tell her for years that his heart attack wasn't her fault, that her love and concern actually helped his recovery, that watching her pursue her dreams gave him joy and purpose. "He's proud of me," she said, as if discovering this truth for the first time. "He's not fragile in the way I've been treating him. He's strong, and he's here, and he wants me to live my life without constantly looking over my shoulder." But healing from childhood trauma isn't as simple as intellectual understanding. Oprah knew this, and she guided Anya toward a deeper recognition of how this experience had both wounded and strengthened her. "Your ability to bring vulnerability to your characters," Oprah noted, "your understanding of loss and fear and the preciousness of time, these gifts in your work come directly from this experience. You haven't just survived trauma, you've transformed it into art that touches millions of people. The way you embody characters who are fighting for something, who are afraid of losing what matters most to them, comes from a place of deep knowing. Your performances have this quality of urgency, as if you understand that every moment on screen might be the last chance to tell that story." Anya nodded slowly, beginning to see her story differently. Emma Woodhouse, Beth Harmon, all of them are characters dealing with some form of loss or abandonment. "I think I've been drawn to these roles because I understand what it feels like to love someone, while simultaneously preparing to lose them." The conversation took another turn when Oprah asked about Anya's relationships, her romantic life, her friendships. Here, the impact of that childhood night revealed itself in unexpected ways. Anya had struggled with allowing people to get close, not because she feared commitment, but because she feared the devastating loss that seemed to follow love. "I keep people at a distance," she admitted. "Not consciously, but there's always this part of me that's calculating risk, measuring how much it would hurt if something happened to them. I've sabotaged relationships because the closer someone got,
the more terrified I became of losing them. I've chosen solitude over vulnerability more times than I can count, convincing myself that independence was strength, when really it was just another form of that 6-year-old's desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. Oprah understood. She had seen this pattern in many of her conversations with people who had experienced early trauma. The heart learns to protect itself by limiting its investments, by loving conditionally, by always keeping one foot out the door. But love isn't about guarantees, Oprah reminded her gently. It's about showing up fully, even knowing that everything is temporary, even knowing that loss is inevitable. Your father's heart attack didn't happen because you loved him too much or too little. It happened because life is unpredictable, and the only choice we have is how we respond to that unpredictability. As their conversation deepened, Anya began to articulate something she had never fully understood about herself. Her perfectionism, her intense work ethic, her tendency to take on incredibly challenging roles despite her young age. All of it stemmed from this deep-seated belief that she had to earn her place, had to prove her worth, had to be so undeniably valuable that life wouldn't dare take her away from the people she loved. I thought if I was successful enough, famous enough, beloved enough, somehow that would protect everyone around me, she said, as if my achievements could build a wall around my family. Oprah smiled with recognition, and now I'm learning that the wall I built to protect them was actually keeping me from fully experiencing the love that was already there. Anya replied, "My father doesn't need me to be perfect to love me. He doesn't need me to sacrifice my happiness to keep him alive. He just needs me to be present, to be honest, to be his daughter." The final moments of their conversation focused on what comes next. How does someone who has lived in the shadow of anticipated loss for more than 20 years step into the light of unconditional presence? For Anya, the answer was both simple and revolutionary. She was learning to trust. Trust that her father's health was not dependent on her vigilance. Trust that her success would not jinx her family's well-being. Trust that love, even when it's temporary, is worth the risk of eventual loss. But most importantly, she was learning to trust that 6-year-old girl who had acted out of pure love, even when she didn't know how to help, even when helping looked like disruption to the adults around her. "Every morning when I check on him now," she told Oprah, "I'm not listening for his breathing because I'm afraid he's dying. I'm listening because I want to hear the sound of life continuing, of another day we get to spend together." There's a difference between vigilance born from fear and attention born from gratitude. Oprah reached across and took Anya's hands. That little 6-year-old girl who ran to help her father, she wasn't being bad or disruptive. She was being brave. She was being loving. She was being exactly who she needed to be in that moment. For the first time in the entire conversation, Anya smiled. Not the practiced smile of a professional actress, but the genuine, relieved smile of someone who had finally heard the words she had been waiting decades to hear. "Maybe it's time to stop punishing her for trying to help," Anya said quietly. "Maybe it's time to thank her," Oprah replied, "for teaching you that love is worth fighting for, even when you don't know how to fight, even when you're too small to make a difference, even when the grown-ups tell you to be quiet." As the interview concluded, Oprah reflected on the profound transformation she had witnessed. Anya Taylor-Joy had walked into that studio carrying the weight of a 6-year-old's perceived failure. She was leaving with the beginning of a new understanding, that the very impulse that had made her feel guilty for 20 years, her desperate desire to help and protect the people she loved, was actually her greatest strength. "Healing isn't about forgetting," Oprah noted in her closing thoughts. "It's about rewriting the story we tell ourselves about our past." Anya spent 2 decades believing she was the problem in that room, 20 years ago. Today she's beginning to see herself as she really was, a child who loved so fiercely that she couldn't stand by and watch someone she cared about suffer. The sound of her father's breathing would always be music to her ears, but now she could listen to it as a celebration rather than a vigil. And that, Oprah knew, made all the difference. Because when we stop running from our past and start embracing the love that motivated our youngest, most vulnerable selves, we finally give ourselves permission to live fully in the present.